If you were a PC gamer back in the late 1990s and early to mid 2000s, you'll know that back then was a special time for video games. We had the likes of Half-Life, Counter-Strike, and Quake, to name but a few. There was a real abundance of high-quality first-person shooters. I recall spending a lot of my earlier days on games like Roller Coaster Tycoon and The Sims. These are games that I had a lot of fun with, but more than anything they served as gateway titles of a sort, introducing me to the capabilities of a computer. Afterwards, I spent the vast majority of my time playing real-time strategy games, and I have so many memories of these. StarCraft, Tiberian Sun, Red Alert, Generals, these are games that I loved for the gameplay more than anything else. Empire Earth was one of my all-time favorites because the campaign was based on real-life moments in history, and I feel that gave it a unique charm that was hard to find in other titles, a bit like the historical accuracy of the Assassin's Creed franchise. And how about Age of Mythology? Oh, this was so much fun. But there was one game that really stood out from the rest for me due to its story, its characters, and its incredibly high-quality cinematics, and that was Warcraft III. A truly legendary title in the Warcraft universe, and for a lot of people, the golden age of Warcraft lore. This is one of my favorite games of all time. I put so many hours into it when I was growing up, and it holds a special place in my heart as a result. It makes the whole Reforged saga more disappointing for me. The 2020 remaster is not all bad, I don't think. I enjoy the updated campaign screens and the very subtle touch-ups to the cinematics, but that's about it. I won't be playing the game with the updated graphics. I have a nostalgic bias towards the classic setting, and honestly I don't think much of the revamped look. I've never actually purchased Reforged anyway because, well, quite frankly, I don't want to give Blizzard any more of my money. But that's a can of worms I would rather not open. This video is going to be a tribute and celebration of the title, a trip down memory lane if you like, and I can think of no better place to start than with its story.
Heroes arise to challenge fate and lead their brethren to battle. As mortal armies rush blindly towards their doom, the burning shadow comes to consume us all. You must rally the Horde and lead your people to their destiny.
We begin with a very short prologue. In the cinematic we see Thrall, war chief of the Orcish Horde. He soon encounters a mysterious being known as the Prophet, who warns him that the Great Burning Shadow, aka demons, aka the Burning Legion, are coming to consume Azeroth. The Prophet tells him that he must lead his people across the sea to the distant lands of Kalimdor in order to defeat the Burning Legion. Thrall grabs his buddy Grom Hellscream and sets sail due west. The game starts in earnest with the Human campaign. The cinematic shows us the human kingdom of Lordaeron, where we once again see the Prophet delivering an extremely vague warning to King Terenas Menethil II. Seriously, there's no mention of demons or orcs or anything, and this is something that was later acknowledged by one of the level designers, David Fried. Naturally, King Terenas is not convinced by his ramblings, and the Prophet heads out to try his luck with someone else. The Human campaign centers around Prince Arthas Menethil, the son of King Terenas and heir to the throne of Lordaeron. This game follows the journeys of quite a few characters, but for all intents and purposes, Arthas is the true main character. I mean, you could argue that he is the main character of the entire Warcraft universe. Arthas is a budding young paladin under the tutelage of senior paladin Uther the Lightbringer, and they have a cordial relationship together. Soon enough, he meets up with Jaina Proudmoore, one of the most powerful sorceresses alive, with whom he has a romantic relationship with, but that's never explored here. They're tasked with investigating a plague that is spreading throughout the Northlands. They encounter the necromancer Kel'Thuzad, who admits that he is responsible for the plague, and reveals the name of his leader, the Dreadlord Mal'Ganis. Arthas and Jaina kill Kel'Thuzad, who insists that his death will make little difference in the long run. Arthas soon discovers that infected grain has been distributed to nearly all the northern boroughs, and that its purpose is not to simply kill the humans, but turn them into the undead. Despite Uther's counsel, Arthas heads to Stratholme to face Mal'Ganis himself. When he arrives, he discovers that the people there have already been infected. And this right here is probably the most iconic scene in the entire Warcraft universe. At the very least, it's in the top 3, when Arthas declares that
this entire city must be purged.
How can you even consider that? There's got to be some other way.
Damn it, Uther. As your future king, I order you to purge this city.
You are not my king yet, boy. Nor would I obey that command even if you were.
Then I must consider this an act of treason.
Treason? You lost your mind, Arthas.
Lord Uther, by my right of succession and the sovereignty of my crown, I hereby relieve you of your command and suspend your paladins from service.
Arthas, you can't just...
It's done! Those of you who have the will to save this land, follow me. The rest of you, get out of my sight.
You've just crossed a terrible threshold, Arthas.
Jaina?
I'm sorry, Arthas. I can't watch you do this.
The Culling of Stratholme. I'm half ashamed yet half proud to admit that I can recite this entire scene word for word from memory. What can I say? I'm just really fucking cool. This is ultimately the beginning of Arthas' descent into darkness. He purges the city and faces Mal'Ganis, who invites him to the Arctic land of Northrend, which is where his true destiny shall unfold. Meanwhile, the prophet tells Jaina that Arthas will find only death in the cold north, and that it falls to her to lead her people to Kalimdor. In Northrend, Arthas encounters a band of dwarves led by his close friend Muradin Bronzebeard. They're here to recover an ancient rune blade known as Frostmourne, but had some difficulty while searching for it. Together they make their way to Mal'Ganis' base of operations, but not without some trouble. At Uther's request, Arthas' men get recalled to Lordaeron by King Terenas, so Arthas responds by hiring mercenaries and using them to burn down their ships. When the task is done, Arthas betrays the mercenaries by telling his men that they burnt the ships of their own accord and orders to kill them. This is an act which disturbs Muradin.
You lied to your men and betrayed the mercenaries who fought for you. What's happening to you, Arthas? Is vengeance all as important to you?
Spare me, Muradin. You weren't there to see what Mal'Ganis did to my homeland.
They find themselves surrounded by Mal'Ganis' forces, so Arthas decides to locate Frostmourne, hoping it will help him save his people. When they find it, they discover it is cursed.
I would gladly bear any curse to save my homeland.
Leave it be, Arthas. Forget this business and lead your men home.
Damn the men! Nothing shall prevent me from having my revenge, old friend. Not even you. Now, I call out to the spirits of this place. I will give anything or pay any price if only it will help me save my people.
With blade in hand, Arthas defeats Mal'Ganis and wanders off into the frozen wastelands. The text screen tells us that he becomes tormented by Frostmourne's maddening voice, the voice of the Lich King, and loses the last vestiges of his sanity. Sometime later, he returns back to Lordaeron.
Ah, my son. I knew you'd be victorious.
You no longer need to sacrifice for your people. You no longer need to bear the weight of your crown. I've taken care of everything.
What is this? What are you doing, my son?
Succeeding you, father.
This kingdom shall fall, and from the ashes shall arise a new order that will shake the very foundations of the world.
Arthas's final monologue at the end there is so epic. I love it. Following directly after these events is the Undead campaign, where we once again follow Prince Arthas, who has now become a Death Knight in service to the Lich King.
Yes, I've damned everyone and everything I've ever loved in his name. And I still feel no remorse, no shame, no pity.
Under the orders of Tichondrius, another Dreadlord, Arthas rallies the Cult of the Damned and resurrects Kel'Thuzad, who appears to him as a ghostly apparition. He then kills Uther to obtain a special urn so that Kel'Thuzad can be fully resurrected.
I dearly hope that there's a special place in hell waiting for you, Arthas.
We may never know, Uther. I intend to live forever.
After doing so, Kel'Thuzad warns Arthas that the Dreadlords cannot be trusted, and that they are the Lich King's jailers. Arthas makes his way to Quel'Thalas, the home of the High Elves, and uses the Sunwell to resurrect Kel'Thuzad into a Lich. Along the way, their efforts are frequently thwarted by the Ranger General of Silvermoon, Sylvanas Windrunner. When she is finally cornered by Arthas, he curses the woman and transforms her into a Banshee. Now that Kel'Thuzad walks the world once more, he tells us about the Lich King and the Burning Legion. Apparently, the Lich King chose Arthas to be his champion long before the Scourge even began. He tells us that the Burning Legion is a vast demonic army that has consumed countless worlds already and now comes to set this world aflame. The Lich King was created by the Burning Legion to pave the way for its arrival, and the Dreadlords are their agents, sent to make sure that he succeeds. Now, this part isn't explained in the game, but the current Lich King was created by a demon lord named Kil'jaeden, from the spirit of an orc shaman named Ner'zhul. There's a rather hefty lore dump in the lead up to this act, which I won't be going over, but what I will say is that thrusting the runeblade Frostmourne from his icy prison in the Frozen Throne is the beginning of him enacting vengeance against the Dreadlords and the Burning Legion. Anyway, they soon come into contact with Archimonde, a mighty demon lord who needs some assistance in getting to Azeroth. He orders Arthas and Kel'Thuzad to retrieve a spellbook belonging to Medivh, the Last Guardian, and use it to bring him into their world. They head to the city of Dalaran, and following a 30-minute mission, they successfully summon Archimonde. When he arrives, though, he places the Dreadlords in command of the Scourge. This isn't the end of the Lich King's grand plan, however, as we will soon find out later in the game. The Undead campaign ends with a cinematic of Archimonde destroying Dalaran using some awesome demon magic.
Agir, Udal, Lutaros. Agir, Modas, Vetalum. Daltaro, Ildas, Glaku. Retul, Zetharas, Amanar, Kutamus. Belar Sumaris, Azaratha, Rakas, Ilkula. Velan ora, mordanos melar, il amor no falos cadar.
The Orc campaign picks up where the prologue left off. Thrall has reached the shores of Kalimdor, but was separated from Grom Hellscream on the journey there. He encounters Cairn Bloodhoof, chieftain of the Bloodhoof Tauren, and aids him by protecting his village. Cairn then tells Thrall of a being in the north known as the Oracle. With this being his only lead, he decides to pursue it. Meanwhile, the Burning Legion continues to ravage the Eastern Kingdoms. It's here where we are introduced to the Pit Lord Manoroth, a lieutenant in the demonic army. Now, he and the Burning Legion have quite a history with the Greenskins. Basically, all you need to know is that many years ago, on their homeworld of Draenor, the Orcs were corrupted by Kil'jaeden when they drank the blood of Manoroth, forming the mighty Horde. This is what's known as the Blood Curse, binding them to the Burning Legion and turning their skin green. They've since been cut off from their demonic rulers, and have only recently begun to rally themselves again under the leadership of Thrall to form the New Horde. Anyway, Thrall quickly finds Grom battling some humans. After defeating them, he wants to scout the area and leave them alone for a time, but Grom insists on fighting them and defies his orders.
I can't take that chance, Grom. Take your clan into the northern forest and build us a settlement. I'll come and find you after we reach the Oracle.
So Grom is tasked with building a settlement, but chopping down huge hordes of forest puts him in conflict with the Night Elves, a race of ancient beings who live in harmony with nature. In a separate scene, we see Manoroth spill his blood into a fountain in an effort to lure the Orcs led by Hellscream to it, and with their renewed vigor slay the Night Elf demigod Cenarius, the ancient enemy of the Burning Legion. Cenarius, as a being so attuned to nature, noticed the deforestation taking place and led a band of Night Elves against the Orcs. They are overpowered by the demigod's might, but several trolls sense the mystical fountain. Thinking it's their only hope of defeating Cenarius, Grom leads his warriors there and calls on them to drink from it. They do just that, and after an intense battle, they slay Cenarius. Manoroth then appears before Hellscream and enslaves him, since the Orcs are made susceptible to his control once again. Meanwhile, Thrall finds the Oracle, who turns out to be the Prophet, and accompanying them is Jaina Proudmoore. The Prophet tells them the invasion of the Burning Legion has already begun, and that they must unite together if they have any hope of defeating them. He also informs Thrall that Hellscream has fallen under their influence, and that he must rescue him. So, Thrall and the humans, led by Jaina, join forces and attempt to save Grom. They manage to capture him and partially free him of the demon's influence. Afterwards, him and Thrall go to face Manoroth together.
I knew you would come. And I see you brought the mighty Hellscream. His blood is mine, as is your whole misbegotten race. The boy believed you could be saved, but he didn't know what burns within your soul. Within your heart, you know we are the same.
there?
The blood haze has lifted. The demon's fire has burnt out in my veins. I have freed myself. No, old friend. You've freed us all.
That is a badass cinematic right there. I've always loved seeing Manoroth's true scale, because the in-game scenes don't exactly do him justice. So now we move on to the Night Elf campaign, where we're introduced to Tyrande Whisperwind, the general of the Night Elf army, encountering the Burning Legion.
Archimond, after 10,000 years, how is it possible?
The Legion has returned to consume this world, woman. And this time, your troublesome race will not stop us.
So yeah, this is actually the second time the Burning Legion has invaded Azeroth. The first time took place 10,000 years ago. It was fought between the Burning Legion and the Kaldorei Resistance, basically the Night Elves, composed of key characters such as Malfurion Stormrage, Tyrande, Illidan Stormrage, and Jared's Shadowsong. The conflict was dubbed the War of the Ancients. Ultimately, the Kaldorei Resistance succeeded in defeating the Burning Legion's invasion, but it came at a tremendous cost, as the original Well of Eternity imploded and a cataclysmic event known as the Great Sundering shattered the continent and destroyed 80% of Kalimdor's landmass. A massive seething whirlpool known as the Maelstrom now remains where the Well of Eternity once stood. Anyway, Tyrande makes it her goal to awaken the druids from their long slumber, in particular Malfurion Stormrage, the wisest and most powerful of all the druids. Malfurion is an incredibly influential character in the Warcraft universe, and is deeply connected to the flows of life on Azeroth. The two of them go around and awaken the rest of the druids. They reach the Barrow Dens, where they stumble upon a prison. Malfurion reveals that residing in the prison is one Illidan Stormrage, Malfurion's twin brother. Tyrande wants to free him as he could prove valuable in the fight against the demons, but Malfurion believes he is far too dangerous, referring to him as the Betrayer. Tyrande doesn't listen to his warnings and heads off to free him anyway. And this is where we're introduced to one of my favourite characters in all of fiction, Illidan Stormrage, another incredibly influential player in this universe. I used to be a little obsessed with Illidan when I was a kid. I've always found his character design really badass. I love his choice of weapons, the Warglaives. Now, why is Illidan called the Betrayer, you ask? Well, that's because he defected to the Burning Legion's side and created a second Well of Eternity 10,000 years ago when the demons first invaded Azeroth in the War of the Ancients. Secretly creating a second Well of Eternity was regarded as a crime by his kin, and as such he has been imprisoned for 10,000 years. I mean, you don't really need to know any of this stuff in the context of this game, but it is interesting nonetheless.
I am free after 10,000 years. Yet still my own brother thinks I am a villain. I'll show him my true power. I'll show him that the demons have no hold over me.
Are you certain of that, Demon Hunter? Are you certain your will is your own?
You reek of death, human. You'll regret approaching me.
Come then. You'll find that we're evenly matched.
Forever. What is it you truly want?
The Dreadlord who commands this undead army is called Tichondrius. He controls a powerful warlock artifact called the Skull of Gul'dan. It is responsible for corrupting these forests.
And you wish for me to steal it? Why?
Let's just say that I have no love for Tichondrius, and the Lord I serve benefit from the Legion's downfall.
Why should I believe anything you say, little human?
My master sees all, Demon Hunter. He knows that you've sought power your whole life. Now it lies within your grasp. Seize it, and your enemies will be undone.
Yes, the power should be mine.
So Illidan tracks down the skull of Gul'dan and consumes it. With his newfound power, he annihilates Tichondrius, but is banished by Malfurion shortly after.
The leader of the undead has been destroyed, and the forests will heal in time.
At the cost of your soul? You are no brother of mine. Be gone from this place, and never set foot in our lands again.
So be it, brother.
This, of course, is all a part of the Lich King's grand plan. By having Illidan destroy Tichondrius and his support team, Archimonde is severely weakened. Anyway, Malfurion and Tyrande soon meet up with Thrall and Jaina. This is where the Prophet shows up and reveals that he is actually Medivh, the last Guardian, who admits that he is the reason the demons invaded Azeroth in the first place when he opened the Dark Portal with the Orcish forces in Draenor. Now he has returned to set things right, and has spent the entire game gathering the humans, the orcs, and the Night Elves together for this final hold against Archimonde and his forces. After a 45-minute mission, Archimonde makes his move onto the World Tree and attempts to drain its energies, but his overconfidence blinds him to the trap laid by Malfurion.
The roots will heal in time, as will the entire world. The sacrifices have been made. Just as the orcs, humans, and night elves discarded their old hatreds and stood united against a common foe, so did nature herself rise up to banish the shadow forever. As for me, I came back to ensure that there would be a future, to teach the world that it no longer needed guardians. The hope for future generations has always resided in mortal hands. And now that my task is done, I will take my place amongst the legends of the past.
Another great cinematic there to end Reign of Chaos, but our journey isn't quite done yet as we proceed on to the expansion, The Frozen Throne.
Betrayer. In truth, it was I who was betrayed. Still I am hunted. Still I am hated. others cannot. That sometimes the hand of fate must be forced.
We start with the Sentinels campaign, effectively Night Elf Round 2, where we're introduced to Maiev Shadowsong, the leader of the Wardens, a group of Night Elves charged with watching over Illidan's prison. Not entirely sure where she was when we released him, but whatever. She is trying to track down the betrayer personally. She comes across a race of serpent-like beings who call themselves the Naga, who appear to have allied themselves with Illidan and harbour a deep hatred for the Night Elves. Their path leads them to the Broken Isles.
Mistress, we followed Illidan's course due east, as you asked. But these strange islands do not appear on any of our maps.
I suspected as much. These islands must have been formed only recently.
What makes you say that?
The ruins all around us, Naisha. I recognize them. This was once the great city of Suramar, built before our civilization was blasted beneath the sea 10,000 years ago.
But how could... Are you suggesting that these islands were somehow raised from the seafloor?
Perhaps. Though there are few powers left in the world capable of raising islands from the deeps. Regardless, it's a mystery we'll have to solve later. We'd best head inland and set up a base camp. Once we're situated, we'll pick up Illidan's trail.
They come across an orc hermit named Drak Thul, who recounts an interesting tale.
Nearly 20 years ago, the great warlock Gul'dan raised these islands from the deeps. He sought to unearth an ancient vault that held the remains of the Dark Titan.
Sargeras. You'd speak of the Legion's creator.
The same. After Sargeras' defeat ages ago, his remains were locked away in an undersea tomb. Gul'dan believed that opening the tomb would grant him the Dark Titan's power. For his pride, he and the rest of our clan were torn to shreds by crazed demons.
They follow Illidan into the tomb of Sargeras, where they encounter the Naga siren Lady Vash. She reveals that the Naga were once night elves that were banished into the sea when the Well of Eternity imploded at the end of the War of the Ancients. Eventually they find Illidan, who seeks to claim an ancient artifact known as the Eye of Sargeras. He uses the eye to collapse the tomb, forcing Maiev to make a run for it. They send a messenger to inform Malfurion of his brother's treachery, and he soon arrives on the Broken Isles with Tyrande. Maiev is happy to see him, but she's rather salty towards Tyrande, given that she is the one who freed Illidan. Shortly afterwards, they encounter the betrayer face to face.
Brother, what are you doing here? I've come to stop you, Illidan. Instead of banishing you, I should have returned you to your cage when I had the chance. I was weak then, but no longer.
I have sworn allegiance to a new master, brother. I have a great task to perform in his service. I'm sorry, but I cannot allow you to stand in my way.
Don't worry, my love. We'll find Illidan wherever he runs. We'll find him.
So they follow Illidan to the Eastern Kingdoms. Malfurion heads off to commune with the land, leaving Tyrande and Maiev to search for him together. They encounter Prince Kael'thas, who needs some help seeking refuge on the other side of the river, so Tyrande offers their aid despite Maiev's protests. They soon face off against waves of undead, and Tyrande gets swept down the river in the process. Maiev abandons the priestess and has Kael'thas help her search for Illidan. Meanwhile, Malfurion witnesses a vision. The land of Northrend is being split apart by Illidan using the Eye of Sargeras. When he reunites with Maiev, she tells him that Tyrande was torn apart by the undead, and that they need to take revenge on his brother. So they track him down and force him to stop his ritual.
Fools! Can you not see? The spell we channeled was meant to strike at the undead, our common enemy. My mission was to destroy the Lich King's stronghold of Icecrown.
And no heed to the cost! Because of you, Tyrande is dead!
What? Your pardon, Lord Stormrage, but the priestess may still be alive. She was swept downriver, but it's premature to simply
Silence,
assume that...
Kael.
You told me she was torn apart. You lied to me.
The betrayer's capture was our primary concern, Shondo. I needed your help. I knew you would go to her, and we would lose our chance.
Just who is the betrayer now, woman? I must go to her immediately.
Believe me, brother. Despite all our differences, you know that I would never lead Tyrande to harm. Let me help you. My Naga can scour the river for us. Let me do this, at least.
Very well.
What? After all he's done, you would trust this traitor?
Silence! I will deal with you later. Let's go, brother.
With Malfurion and Illidan's combined forces, they manage to save Tyrande.
You have brought much suffering to the world, Illidan. For that, you can never be forgiven. However, you saved the life of my love. For that, I will let you go. But should you ever threaten my people again...
I understand, brother. Lordship over this world was never my aim. Only power. Only the magic. I've lingered here too long. I must go. By aiding you, I've betrayed my new master. If I am not careful, his wrath will be my end. Farewell, brother. Tyrande. I doubt our paths will cross again. In Shu Falana.
And that's the end of the Sentinels campaign. Unfortunately, there are no cinematics until the end of the game, but as you can tell, a lot of focus is placed on Illidan in the Frozen Throne, and this trend continues into the human campaign. We start by following Prince Kael'thas and his band of Blood Elves, a faction of High Elves who are descendants of the Highborn, an ancient race of Night Elves that defected to the Burning Legion's side during the War of the Ancients, the same Night Elves who became Naga. Those who weren't turned into Naga were exiled from Kalimdor to the Eastern Kingdoms and founded Quel'Thalas. They're receiving orders from an absolute knob named Grand Marshal Garithos, and he's a real dick to them, like straight up racist, and goes out of his way to make their lives a living hell. He gives them a seemingly impossible task to complete, forcing Kael'thas to make use of the Naga led by Lady Vash. Kael'thas reveals that he and his people are suffering from an insatiable hunger, which turns out to be an addiction to arcane magic. You see, after Arthas used the Sunwell in Quel'Thalas to resurrect Kel'Thuzad, its energies became tainted. In response to this, Kael'thas had the corrupted Sunwell destroyed, saving his people, but also cutting them off from their source of power, which means they will eventually die without a replacement. Lady Vash offers up a solution to his problem: demons as a fount of power. But before their conversation ends, Garithos shows up and accuses the elves of high treason for being in league with the Naga. Kael'thas and his brethren are subsequently imprisoned. Luckily, Vash turns up, frees Kael'thas, and leads his elves through a portal to find Illidan. After a quick game of tower defense, they find themselves in Outland. Outland is all that remains of Draenor, the former homeland of the Orcish Horde. Draenor also experienced a sundering after the Orc shaman Ner'zhul opened a number of dimensional portals here that ultimately tore the planet apart. Eventually they find Illidan and free him after he was captured by Maiev.
Many months after the Legion's defeat at the Battle of Mount Hyjal, I was visited by one of the last great demon lords, Kil'jaeden.
You have been both friend and foe to the Burning Legion. But by consuming the skull of Gul'dan, you sealed our defeat in this world. I come to offer you a second chance to serve us.
What would you have me do, Great One?
My creation, the Lich King, has betrayed me. He dared to break the pact that binds him to my will. But his spirit still lies trapped inside the frozen throne of Icecrown. Destroy it for me, and I will grant you your heart's desire.
It shall be done, Great One. It shall be done. At Dalaran, I attempted to use the Eye of Sargeras to melt away the polar ice caps surrounding the Icecrown Glacier. If the spell had succeeded, the Lich King would have been vanquished forever.
But the cursed Night Elves intervened,
and the spell went awry. Given my failure, I fled to this desolate place to evade Kil'jaeden's wrath. Now, if I am to remain here in exile, we will need to ensure that Kil'jaeden's agents have been cleansed from the land.
The rest of the campaign is all about defeating a pit lord named Magtheridon, who has claimed rule over Outland. With the help of a faction of broken Draenei, they managed to do just that.
I have come to replace you. You're a relic, Magtheridon. A ghost of a past age. The future is mine. From this moment on, Outland and all of its denizens will bow to me. Hear me now, you trembling mortals. I am your lord and master. Illidan reigns supreme.
Keep your head down, fool. Something terrible is drawing near.
Foolish little mortal. You failed to destroy the frozen throne as I commanded. And still you thought to hide from me in this forsaken backwater. I thought you to be more cunning, Illidan.
Kil'jaeden, I was merely set back. I was attempting to bolster my forces. The Lich King will be destroyed. I promise you.
Still, these servitors you've gathered show some promise. I will give you one last chance, Illidan. Destroy the frozen throne, or face my eternal wrath.
Perhaps hiding here was not the most prudent decision. Still, the quest lies before us. Will you follow me into the cold heart of death itself?
The Naga are yours to command, Lord Illidan. Where you go, we follow.
The Blood Elves are yours as well, Master. We will drive the Scourge before us and shatter the frozen throne as you command.
And that's the end of the human campaign. I've always loved how Kil'jaeden adjusts his body here when he refers to Illidan's allies. The final campaign follows the undead. In it, we see Sylvanas, who has become a Dark Ranger, alongside Kel'Thuzad in Lordaeron. 3 Dreadlords are overseeing the area, but they're ignorant of Archimonde's defeat. And this is where Arthas appears. He informs them of the Legion's downfall, and his intentions to take back control of the Scourge. The Dreadlords flee, so Arthas orders Sylvanas and Kel'Thuzad to secure the kingdom. During the mission, Arthas experiences seizures, diminishing his power, and receives a message from the Lich King himself, telling him to return to Northrend, for danger draws near. In a separate scene, we see...
Lady Sylvanas, we are pleased that you came.
How could I not? For some reason, I no longer hear the Lich King's voice in my head. My will is my own once again. You Dreadlords seem to know why.
We've discovered that the Lich King is losing his power. As it wanes, so too does his ability to command undead such as you.
And what of King Arthas? What about his powers?
Though his runeblade Frostmourne carries powerful enchantments, Arthas's own powers will fade in time. It is inevitable.
You seek to overthrow him, and you want my help to do it.
The Legion may be defeated, but we are the Nathrezim. We'll not let some upstart human get the best of us. Arthas must fall.
The Lich Kel'Thuzad is far too loyal to betray his master. But you, on the other hand...
Hate him. I have my own reasons for seeking vengeance. Arthas murdered my people and turned me into this monstrosity. I may take part in your bloody coup, but I will do so in my own way.
So the Dreadlords trap and ambush Arthas, who then flees to the wilderness to meet up with Kel'Thuzad. Unfortunately, he gets trapped and ambushed again, this time by Sylvanas.
Back, you mindless ones! You shall not fall today, my king.
This isn't over, Arthas. I'll never stop hunting you.
From here, the campaign splinters a bit. Part of it is dedicated to Arthas, but the other part is dedicated to Sylvanas. With the Lich King's power fading, Sylvanas has reclaimed control over her body, but she's still a bit upset that she's undead. One of the Dreadlords, Varimathras, appears and offers her a formal invitation to join their new order. Sylvanas declines the offer as she doesn't wish to become a slave again. This puts her in conflict with the Dreadlords. In no time, she annihilates Varimathras' base, who then offers to help her defeat his brothers, so Sylvanas accepts. He leads the Dark Lady to Deatharok's stronghold, who has enslaved Grand Marshal Garithos. I find that funny. Deatharok is summarily destroyed by Sylvanas and Varimathras, and as such Garithos is freed from his mind control. Sylvanas then makes an offer to the man.
Stand down, humans. I have no quarrel with you.
What is it you want, elf witch?
We have a common enemy. The last Dreadlord Balnazar currently controls the capital city of your kingdom. If you help me kill him, I'll see to it that you get your lands back.
Why should we trust you? You're part of the scourge that drove us out in the first place.
Not anymore. My only interest here is vengeance.
Very well. I'll rally what's left of my forces and meet you outside the gates.
Come now. You have no intention of giving them their lands back.
Of course not. The humans are simply a means to an end.
You sound more like one of us with every passing day, my lady.
Watch it, Dreadlord.
I love this interaction between Varimathras and Garithos here.
The capital city is heavily defended. Balnazar is no fool, my lady. This battle can be won only through attrition.
What's the matter, demon? Are you afraid?
Watch your tongue, human dog. Your hollow bravado does not impress me.
Stand down, gentlemen. Save your anger for Balnazar. Garithos.
And so, with their combined forces, they kill Balnazar and then Grand Marshal Garithos as well.
You wouldn't dare.
There, your business is done. Now I want you wretched animals out of my city before I...
Kill him, too.
Gladly.
The capital city is ours, but we are no longer part of the Scourge. From here on out, we shall be known as the Forsaken. We will find our own path in this world, Dreadlord, and slaughter anyone who stands in our way.
I really enjoy Sylvanas in the Frozen Throne. I think she's a great personality here, and I'm glad she got some spotlight. Anyway, in Northrend, Arthas meets up with Anubarak, an agent of the Lich King sent to aid him in his endeavors. They come into conflict with the Blood Elves and eventually have a chat with Kael'thas. He reveals that Illidan is behind the invasion and goads Arthas for not being able to reach the Icecrown Glacier in time. Anubarak suggests they take a shorter route through the shattered kingdom of Azjol-Nerub, so they do just that. Inside, they find remnants of Myrddin's dwarves still lost in the frozen north, who impede Arthas' progress and warn him of an ancient evil stirring in the deeps. This turns out to be the Faceless Ones, a monstrous race of beings that arose from the organic matter that seeped from the Old Gods. There's a long and complicated history with the Old Gods, but it's not relevant to this game, so I won't be going into it. Eventually, Arthas arrives at the Icecrown Glacier.
Arthas, my champion, you have come at last.
Master?
There is a fracture in my prison, the Frozen Throne, and my energies are seeping from it. That is why your powers have diminished.
But how?
The rune-relayed Frostmourne was once locked inside the throne as well. I thrust it from the ice, so that it would find its way to you, and then lead you to me. And so it has. Now, we face a grave danger. My creator, the Demon Lord Kil'jaeden, sent his agent here to destroy me. If they should reach the Frozen Throne before you, all will be lost. The Scourge will be undone. Now hurry. I will grant you all the power I can spare.
I saw another vision of the Lich King. He has restored my powers. I know now what I must do. It's time to end the game. Once and for all.
After opening the way to the throne chamber, Arthas has a one-on-one duel with Illidan.
Forget this business. Lead your men home. Even if you were. Damn it. As your future king, I order you. You lost your mind, Arthas. I must consider this an act of treason, dust. You lied to your men and betrayed the mercenaries who fought for you.
What's happening to you, Arthur? Your young prince will find only death in the cold north.
Return the blade. Complete the circle. Release me from this prison.
And so Arthas merges with Ner'zhul to become the new Lich King. Holy shit. This is my all-time favorite ending to a video game. I get mad goosebumps whenever I see it. Watching Arthas ascend to the pinnacle of the glacier as he hears the voices of all the people he has forsaken along the way is so powerful. Everything we have been through in the campaign has come full circle to reach this zenith. The magnificent orchestral piece and choir vocals accompanying it, ending with that iconic shot of Arthas sitting on the frozen throne. God, I love this game. Warcraft 3 was one of my first cinematic experiences in a video game, and it completely blew my mind when I was a kid. I found the story so compelling and immersive, with many memorable moments from start to finish, and the cinematics are just incredible. They were unlike anything I had ever seen before in a video game, and they still give me chills even today. The cinematography and orchestration of each one is excellent. My favorites are definitely Arthas's betrayal and the Ascension. I can barely get over how good these are. I found myself so wrapped up in the lore and the world. It was a truly dazzling adventure. At the time, it was easily the most mature narrative I had ever experienced as well. I grew up with Nintendo consoles, so Warcraft's darker tone really struck a chord with me. It made the entire journey that little bit more unique. More than anything though, it's the characters I fell in love with. Arthas's descent into madness is one of those classic tales, a budding young hopeful who, despite having nothing but good intentions, loses his way and turns to the dark side, as it were. Something I've always found interesting is the relationship between Illidan and Malfurion. They are twin brothers, they share a bond together, but there's an awful lot of bitterness between them. Malfurion just can't accept Illidan's lust for power and lack of remorse for his deeds. And then there's Tyrande, whom they both grew up with and are both in love with, but she chose Malfurion. I mean, you can't blame her, really. But it's another factor that causes strife in their extremely complicated relationship. When they part ways at the end of the Sentinels campaign, it's perhaps the closest thing to peace that they have ever achieved, and it's a nice end to their arc together. It really is an epic narrative, and there's quite a bit of nuance to each faction. I really enjoy the use of different perspectives to tell the story. Reaching a new campaign is so exciting, because all the races are highly distinct from one another, but they still connect logically as well. If I had to pick a low point, I'd choose the Orc campaign. Not because it's bad or anything, I just don't find it as compelling as any of the others. The Orc campaign is the only one that doesn't feature either Arthas or Illidan, so yeah. I gotta say, for a game that was released in 2002, the voice acting in Warcraft 3 is pretty damn good. I mean, it ain't perfect by any means. The delivery can be rather flat at times, but it's good enough to be notable for sure. There are some cliché lines here and there, but nothing that takes away from the experience in the slightest. You want to know what else deserves praise? The game's soundtrack. Each of the 4 races get their own style of music, with some overlap here and there, but they complement each faction's overall qualities and aesthetic wonderfully. With the Orcs you get a lot of drums and warlike music. For the Night Elves there are more ambient pieces with flutes and the like. The humans get heroic orchestral pieces that are amongst my favourites, and the undead receive mysterious, haunting themes. The compositions are brilliant, aiding with the game's tone and atmosphere of their respective sections marvellously. I am overcome with nostalgia when I listen to the themes that play in the main menu. They really are great. Warcraft 3's gameplay is a fairly standard real-time strategy experience by today's expectations, but at the time of its release it was the first ever 3D RTS game, which subsequently became the benchmark for the entire genre. StarCraft's use of 3 distinct races is often cited as revolutionizing real-time strategy in terms of gameplay. For Warcraft 3, it was another revolution, but more so in its presentation and graphic fidelity. You can see the gradual progression in the gameplay and UI with these examples. Here is Warcraft 2 alongside Command & Conquer Tiberian Sun, both of which were released in the late 90s, and share fairly similar setups. When Blizzard debuted the alpha version of StarCraft at E3 in 1996, it received a weak response, with many criticizing it for being Warcraft in space, a now famous line, and as a result the entire project was overhauled. Now here's the original StarCraft, which came out 3 years after Warcraft 2. As you can see, the UI has completely changed, and this is something that naturally follows onto Warcraft 3. StarCraft and Warcraft's influence on the RTS genre cannot and should not be understated. These are legendary titles for that reason, but let's take a look at what we're working with here. The basics of the game are as you would expect. You gather resources to build structures so you can create various units and use them to defeat your enemies. Following on from StarCraft, Warcraft features 4 distinct and playable races. In the Frozen Throne campaign, there are moments where you control the Naga as well, but they aren't as fully fleshed out as the 4 main factions. Each race share common and unique characteristics that make sense for their lore. For example, as Night Elves, you don't cut down trees with wisps, they just attach themselves and return lumber without damaging the trees. There are many things that make each race unique, like the undead's ability to summon structures rather than building them. The humans can have multiple peasants work on a building at once, increasing the speed it's constructed, whereas wisps physically grow into the ancients themselves. I don't know where I heard this shit, but back in the day I used to think that continuously tapping the mouse button on a building would speed up its construction time. Was anyone else exposed to that clearly false rumor? Anyway, as you can imagine, each race has its own strengths and weaknesses, but the game still feels very balanced, with no faction being particularly stronger than any of the others. That is an impressive achievement. I can't even begin to imagine how much difficulty there is in balancing each race's units, buildings, heroes, abilities, the way they gather resources, etc, etc. Each race can create powerful units named heroes, which can gain experience and increase their attributes, as well as their respective spells unique to them. More often than not, it's the heroes and their abilities that ultimately determine the outcome of a battle, which is especially true in the campaign. The units definitely play a part though. Now, I'm not the most informed or skilled player when it comes to this game, but the approach I take is to cover all bases. If your enemies make flying units, you need to be able to counter that. If the enemies are very aggressive in the early game, you need to prepare for that, amongst many more possible scenarios. The most competitive RTS experience I have had is with StarCraft 2, just online matchmaking, and I know there are loads of different strategies for each race, which I can only assume is the same for this game. There's a lot of variety in the different types of heroes and units, so getting caught off guard is entirely possible, but you'll feel that the most against other players, as opposed to the NPCs, and in the campaign things are rather cut and dried, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem. There are other things, like creeps out on the map which you can kill for some extra experience and gold, neutral buildings to acquire unique units, items worn by heroes to increase their attributes and whatnot. There's a day-night cycle which increases or reduces the player's visibility on the map, and so on and so forth. As with any RTS game, to really succeed, you need to be quite the dexterous player, quickly swapping between your heroes, units, buildings, gathering resources, moving your minions into particular positions to gain the upper hand. It's often advantageous to perform actions faster than your opponent, having a greater APM or actions per minute, which a lot of people seem to be obsessed with in this genre. In StarCraft at least, I know it's considered a legitimate metric for judging player skill. Competitive Warcraft III is still going fairly strong even today, which I think is notable considering the game's age. This is completely unrelated, but I find it funny how like 30% of the screen is taken up by the UI. This just wouldn't fly in today's age. So with the basics out the way, let's talk about gameplay and the story. First and foremost, there's an excellent sense of progression in the campaigns. You always start off very limited in what you can build and what units you can produce. The campaign is informative when it comes to how each race works and the abilities of each unit. They act as solid tutorials in that sense. By the end of the campaign, you can make everything, and that feels good. This also applies to the difficulty of each subsequent campaign, which generally feel more challenging than the preceding one. At the start of each mission, you'll be given one or two main quests, objectives that must be completed to proceed to the next chapter, but there are also optional side quests that need to be discovered by the player, which usually grants benefits that help with the main objectives. It could be extra units, heroes, or items. I always go out of my way to complete the side quests, because they're interesting activities that help flesh out the gameplay, and the bonuses can be highly beneficial. There is some variety in what you do in each mission. At times it could be as simple as building a base and wiping out your opponent. Other times the game has you traverse underground sections where there is no building, your units are set, and you must navigate to the end of the level with whatever you're given. These missions are some of my favorites, as they're often more creative in what you must achieve, despite being more limited from the get-go. There are also missions with timers, where you have to defend your base against waves of attackers within a time frame. Check out what happened to me in this mission. I wasn't too happy with how this ended, so I started up the mission again and used some of those classic cheat codes, like Who's Your Daddy, I See Dead People, and Greed is Good 99999. I mean, come on, I beat this level, so I felt I was justified here. You can go through the entire campaign using cheats, but it's not as fulfilling, obviously, so I decided not to for this video, with a few exceptions here and there. Every mission in Reign of Chaos is pretty easy, all things considered, even the final mission, Twilight of the Gods. This game has difficulty settings, easy, normal, or hard. I played normal here. To be honest, the only time I had any trouble was with the final mission in Frozen Throne, a symphony of frost and flame, a clear reference to George R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire. Let me tell you, this is by far the hardest mission in the whole game. Illidan is relentless here. I can't beat this level without using cheats, I'm kind of ashamed to admit. I almost feel it's too difficult relative to everything before it, but I'm willing to forgive that since it's the final mission. Honestly, there's not too much else to say in terms of pure gameplay. The Frozen Throne adds new units, additional heroes, some more items, and the ability to control the Naga in very specific missions. But seeing as it's an expansion to Reign of Chaos, it's not too different as you'd expect. The expansion's campaigns do a good job at introducing these new elements, so it's easy to understand. Frozen Throne also has a secret mission, a game of tower defense if you solve this sheep puzzle in the mission before it. Not entirely sure what's going on here, but whatever. It's an incredibly simple tower defense with only 5 structures to build, but I always have a good time with this level. I used to play the shit out of TD back in the day when I lived my life on Battle.net, so this does bring a smile to my face. If you defeat all 30 waves in the secret mission, for the next one you get a unique hero, the Pandarin Brewmaster, which is a really awesome reward. Overall, gameplay in Warcraft 3 is solid. The 4 races bring their own unique variations, and the tightly controlled progression from chapter to chapter helps keep things interesting. This trend also continues with all the additional features in the expansion. Now, something you may have noticed is how absent the orcs are in the Frozen Throne. I can only assume the developers couldn't find a way to fit them into the story, so instead they're given a bonus campaign, The Founding of Durotar, and it is its own beast entirely. This part is all about Thrall leading the Horde to the Barrens of Kalimdor and establishing the nation of Durotar, named after his father Duratan. You're placed in control of Rexxar, a half-orc, half-ogre beastmaster who aids Thrall in the founding of his nation. Joining him in his journey is the new orc hero Rokan, and the story of the campaign is basically going around and helping Thrall and his allies establish a settlement here. They come into conflict with a band of humans, which leaves the war chief confused as to why Jaina would abandon their peace agreement. But as we soon find out in the second act, the humans are led by Grand Admiral Proudmoore, Jaina's dad. After recruiting the aid of the trolls, the taurens, the ogres, and even Jaina herself, they travel to Theramore Isle, and Rexxar puts an end to the Admiral's schemes by killing him. Afterwards, Thrall asks Rexxar to return to Durotar with him and make a home for himself, but Rexxar declines given that he's ultimately a wanderer in this land. So, the story is pretty basic. I don't really have much to say about it, but the gameplay is something else. The bonus campaign feels more like an MMO than a real-time strategy game. There is no gathering resources, no building structures, and I think there's only one mission where you build an army. You have control of your heroes, and a few select units if you can afford them, but that's as far as it goes. You're tasked with completing a shitload of main objectives, as well as loads of optional side quests if you so choose. You're stuck with Rexxar and Rokan for the entire journey, leveling up and obtaining some extremely powerful items to help you on your way. Occasionally the game will add some extra heroes on top of that, but they're only temporary, the two exceptions being the Pandarin Brewmaster if you complete his side quest, and eventually Cairn Bloodhoof in the final act. You have to travel to different zones and complete the unique challenges and quests that they hold. You go to Razor Hill, the Echo Isles, Thunder Ridge, Mulgore, Dustswallow Marsh, Theramore, and as a former WoW player, that is really cool. The Pandarin Brewmaster even mentions that he is from Pandaria, and that was surprising for me to see in this game. Like, I always knew that pandas were a thing in the Warcraft universe, but to see him specifically mention Pandaria here caught me off guard a bit. I don't know if I'm correct, but this very much feels like the developers are planting the seeds for World of Warcraft. The setup seems way too similar for it to be a coincidence. This is a completely different adventure to what we get in the rest of the campaign, and it's a refreshing change of pace. The main essence of what you do is power up your heroes. There are so many quests to complete, and they almost always offer ridiculously good items. The setup is much less rigid than the rest of the campaign. You're usually given 2 or 3 main quests to complete at a time, and there are several optional areas that provide unique challenges. The game never directs you to these places, instead you're encouraged to explore and perhaps stumble upon them yourself, and that is rewarding. I'll admit I used the I See Dead People cheat here because I didn't want to miss out on anything, and honestly I'm glad I did. It's also an extremely forgiving journey. If any of your heroes die, they simply resurrect with no cost to you at one of the numerous resurrection stones placed all over. That is something I appreciate. Overall, the bonus campaign is pretty great, especially if you've played WoW and then come back to this. It was very entertaining for me to see it play out, and the switch up in gameplay makes for a good change. It's a pretty long campaign spread out over 3 acts, and the first one took me just over an hour to complete, so there is a decent amount of content here. Now, I would like to talk about the old Battle.net, but I think this video has gone on long enough. There's a simple custom games tab on the main menu screen now, and it's nowhere near as exciting as it was before, but perhaps that's just my nostalgia speaking. I always knew that revisiting Warcraft 3 was going to be a good time for me, but I severely underestimated just how good a time it was. I had so much fun going back to this title. It's amazing how playing a game you used to play as a kid brings back so many fond memories of a different time. Warcraft 3 is right up there alongside The Legend of Zelda as one of the biggest reasons why I'm such an avid gamer today. I discovered things I've never seen before on this playthrough. I naturally stumbled upon the Shrine of the Uberfish. Okay, I seem to recall this from my younger days, but what the hell is it? I looked up what this was in reference to on the internet, but my research proved fruitless. Fortunately, that same research led me to discover that Warcraft 3 is positively bursting with Easter eggs, and some of these are fucking hilarious. The largest panda ever, complete with a cutscene for its introduction. I love it. Some fat loot in the prologue, a Hydralisk in the Night Elf campaign that is really powerful, and trust me when I say that is just the tip of the iceberg. The icing on the cake has to be this awesome credit sequence. This song, Power of the Horde, is pretty good. I'm definitely hearing some Metallica influences in there, and Arthas playing an electric ice guitar will always be entertaining to me. And how could I forget the comedic responses from units and heroes if you click them enough times in quick succession?
What ails you? Is someone injured? Is my aid required?
Scalpel. Sponge. Magic wand.
There is peace and serenity within the light.
Clear.
Cross over, children. Cross over into the light. I have been chosen by the big metal hand in the sky. Side effects may include dry mouth, nausea, vomiting, water retention, painful rectal itch, hallucination, dementia, psychosis, coma, death, and halitosis. Magic is not for everyone. Consult your doctor before use. What ails you?
Is there danger?
Feel my wrath.
It feels like the developers had a lot of fun making this game, and perhaps that's something that's been missing at Blizzard over the past few years. Obviously, this is just conjecture on my part. I have absolutely no insight into the current developmental process, and it's highly likely a completely different set of developers are employed now. But Warcraft 3 has so much charm to it, and I really admire that. It's a game that has been made with considerable love and care, offering a story that is just as awesome as I remember, and I'm really happy to say that. Warcraft 3 is easily one of Blizzard Entertainment's best ever titles. I'll be honest, I have a nostalgic bias towards this game, but I still think it holds up tremendously well today, gameplay and story, and going back to it all these years later brought me joy, happiness, and in a way sadness. It reminds me of a much simpler time in my life, and I do miss this style of storytelling from Blizzard. I hope you enjoyed this retrospective. I can't express how immensely fun it was for me to revisit this game. I'm gonna need some time for the next video since I have to play through it all, and I want to be extra careful with what I say about it. But yeah, hopefully I'll see you next time. Cheers.